You ever hear about that cabin deep in the woods? The one no one's sure even exists anymore? There's a reason people stopped looking for it. It's hidden so far into the forest that most don't even make it halfway before turning back. But there was this one guy, a loner, the kind who liked to test his limits. He didn't believe in all those stories, thought they were just local legends meant to scare kids. He went looking for it alone. They say the deeper you go, the more the forest starts to feel wrong. It gets too quiet, like the trees are holding their breath, watching. He felt it too, that shift in the air when he finally saw the cabin. It was half rotten, covered in vines, and sinking into the ground as if the forest had been trying to swallow it whole for years. But even though it looked abandoned, there was something about it, something that felt like it had been waiting for him. Almost like it had a pulse, faint but there, beating in time with the silence of the woods. He should have turned back. Anyone with sense would have. But he was curious, and curiosity can be dangerous. He stepped closer, and that's when he heard it. The wind wasn't blowing, not really, but there was this sound like a whisper, too soft to understand, but too real to ignore. It wasn't the wind, it wasn't his imagination. It was something else. And that's when the chill hit him. The kind that settles deep in your bones and won't go away. Night was coming fast, and with it, the feeling that whatever was inside that cabin had been waiting a long time for him. It was midnight when I boarded the train. The station was deserted, shrouded in an eerie silence that clung to the cold autumn air. The train itself, an old rusted machine with dimly lit carriages, seemed to creak with the weight of time. But I had no choice. I needed to get home. I found an empty compartment, settled into a worn-out seat, and tried to calm the uneasy feeling gnawing at the back of my mind. The train lurched forward, and the dim lights flickered for a moment. I looked around. There were no other passengers in sight. The journey felt endless. Outside the windows, the countryside blurred into a swirling darkness, and the train's rhythmic chugging seemed to grow louder with each passing second. Minutes turned into hours, but the train didn't seem to stop at any station. I began to feel trapped, as if I was the only soul left on this train, hurtling through an endless void. Suddenly, I heard a faint noise. It started as a whisper, but soon grew louder, a low, guttural hum, like the sound of something ancient stirring deep beneath the earth. I stood up, peering out of my compartment, and that's when I saw it. A shadow moved at the end of the carriage. It was tall, too tall for a human, and its shape shifted unnaturally as it slithered toward me. My heart raced as the lights flickered again. The shadow was closer now, and I could hear it breathing a slow, menacing rasp that filled the air with dread. I scrambled back into my seat, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. But as the lights blinked out for a split second, the shadow was gone. Silence. Only the sound of the train's wheels clattering on the tracks remained. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was my imagination. Maybe the long hours of travel had gotten to me. But then, the door to my compartment slid open. Standing in the doorway was the shadow, its featureless face staring straight at me. It didn't speak. It didn't need to. I could feel the weight of its presence suffocating the air, its intentions dark and undeniable. My body was frozen with fear, unable to move as the figure crept closer. I don't remember how I found the strength, but I threw myself out of my seat and ran, tearing through the empty carriages, desperate to escape. But no matter how far I ran, the shadow was always right behind me, its whispers growing louder, filling my mind with impossible thoughts. Finally, I reached the end of the train. The door led out to the tracks, but when I opened it, there was nothing outside, just blackness. The train wasn't moving through the countryside anymore. It was floating in an endless void, suspended between time and space. And then I realized I hadn't boarded a train to take me home. This was a one-way ticket to nowhere, a passage into the unknown, where the shadows rule and no one ever returns. It was late evening when I inherited the old mansion, a labyrinth of rooms filled with forgotten memories. There were countless mysteries in that house, but one warning had always echoed in my family: never look into the mirror in the attic. As a child, I had asked about it, but my questions were always met with silence or fear. I was told that strange things happened around that mirror. Some even whispered that those who stared into it saw more than just their reflection. But now, as the last living heir, I could finally uncover the truth. One stormy night, with rain pelting against the windows, I decided to go up. Something about the storm seemed to call me, and I couldn't resist the pull any longer. Armed with a lantern and a sense of anticipation, I climbed the creaky stairs to the attic. The air was thick with dust, the smell of old wood, and something I couldn't quite place. The lantern's glow cast long shadows that danced eerily against the wooden beams. And there, at the far end of the attic, stood the mirror. It was massive, framed in tarnished gold, and hidden beneath a heavy, moth-eaten cloth. My heart pounded in my chest as I slowly approached it, my feet moving as if on their own. The warnings echoed in my mind, but my curiosity was stronger. With trembling hands, I pulled the cloth away. The mirror gleamed in the dim light, its surface unnervingly clear. I saw my reflection, but something was off. It was subtle, just a flicker, a slight delay in movement. I leaned in closer, my breath fogging up the glass. My reflection stared back at me, mimicking my every move. Except for its eyes. The eyes didn't seem to belong to me. They were darker, deeper, like they were hiding something. I blinked, but the reflection didn't. That's when I realized it was watching me. A shiver ran down my spine, but I couldn't look away. My reflection's lips curled into a smile that wasn't mine. It leaned closer to the glass, almost as if it wanted to whisper something, and I felt an icy breath on my skin. "Come closer," it said. Its voice was my own, but laced with something sinister, like a distant echo in a dark cave. I tried to step back, but my feet were rooted to the floor. The mirror seemed to pulse, as if it were alive, drawing me in. I could feel it pulling at my mind, my thoughts slipping away into the glass. My reflection, that thing, was getting closer. Its smile twisted, eyes wide with hunger. Suddenly, I heard a faint tapping. It was soft at first, but growing louder. It wasn't coming from outside, it was coming from inside the mirror. The reflection raised its hand, pressing it against the glass. The tapping turned into scratching, nails scraping against the surface. Then, in one terrifying moment, I realized it wasn't just mimicking me. It was trying to get out. Panicked, I tore myself away from the mirror, stumbling backward. But the reflection didn't fade. It stayed there, grinning at me, even as I ran down the stairs and slammed the attic door shut. For days, I tried to forget what I had seen. But every night, I would hear the tapping, faint at first, then louder, as if the mirror was calling to me. The whispers started soft, insistent, always the same words. "Let me out." One evening, unable to bear it any longer, I crept back to the attic, drawn once again by the terrible pull. The door creaked open, and I saw the mirror uncovered, standing there as if waiting for me. My reflection smiled. But this time, it wasn't inside the mirror anymore.